This week, Jeff Pollard from Forrester is with us to discuss Forrester's AEGIS framework. Then, in the enterprise security news, there's funding and acquisitions, but we're not going to talk about them. There's just not time. AI is going to call the cops on you, and everyone's losing money on AI. And Anthropic agreed to pay for all the copyright infringement they did when training models. And Otter AI got sued for recording millions of conversations without consent. Burger King got embarrassed, and their lawyers didn't like it. NPM package mayhem, certificate authority hijinks, AI Darwin Awards, all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Legacy tools flood you with alerts. Node Zero shows you what's actually exploitable. Horizon 3 AI's offensive security platform autonomously identifies attack paths, validates findings with real proof, and helps teams prioritize remediation based on true impact. No agents, no guesswork, no disruption. Just production-safe testing that mirrors how adversaries move in the real world. Stay ahead of credential abuse, privilege escalation, and lateral movement. Learn how Node Zero changes the game at securityweekly.com/Horizon3. Ransomware. Supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National School Picture Day. This is episode 424, recorded on Thursday, September 11th, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am great. I'm in San Diego. My partner is at the world's oldest computing conference. It is the International Convention of Conference for Parallel Processing. I think that's it. It's ICPP is the acronym. And this is like year 54 for this conference. And so it started in the early 70s.
Are they doing
and
punch
right
card
across
stuff?
What's that?
Are they doing punch card stuff?
It's mostly these days. It's all supercomputer folks. It's all HPC folks, and that's what my partner does. So, right across the street from the resort where they're having that conference was a recording studio I could rent by the hour. So,
very nice, very nice.
This is not a virtual background. This is the actual studio.
You look fancier than I do.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, "Do you just want a window background? We've got a window of the ocean." I was like, "No, I want all the studio gear. I want stacks of amps and guitars and stuff." You can't actually see any amps or guitars, but they're all over the place.
That's awesome.
All right. Also joining us, the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How you doing, Sean?
Doing pretty good, Adrian. How are things with you?
I am good. It's they are working on fixing the AC in the studio, so you might see me perspire a bit. You might see me glisten a tidbit.
Yes,
you can rent it by the hour, but fans are optional.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a discount for that.
Well, and that's like the new makeup influencer thing. Is like everybody wants their face to look wet now, so you're good.
Really?
Like, oh yeah,
I am trendy. I am so trendy.
You are super trendy. Yeah. And as a sweaty girl, I mean, I'm glad because I knew I only had to wait 30, 40 years for that to come into trend.
So just to give a quick shout out, this is, I am at the music company. They're not asking me to do this. I'm still going to pay for this. But if you are in San Diego and you need to record a podcast or a song or something like that. The music company on Mission Boulevard lets you rent by the hour, and it's really easy to just sign up for slots on their website. So pretty cool. All right, quick announcement, then we'll jump into the interview. You can join us for InfoSec World 2025 coming up soon in October 27th through 29th in Lake Buena Vista, Florida at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. Workshops run from October 25th through 26th and October 29th and 30th, so before and after. And you can save 25% with code ISW25-SW at securityweekly.com/ISW2025. And feel free to go back 10 seconds as many times as you need to figure out what I just said. Today's topic is Forrester's AEGIS framework for Agentic AI, which I have on my Remarkable here. Been checking out. And we're excited to have Jeff Pollard, VP and Principal Analyst on the Security and Risk team at Forrester Research with us today. And Jeff, welcome to the show. You are one of the authors here, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, there are 18 people on this list of authors for this piece, but you are the first one on that. So I don't know if that represents how much work you put into it.
It certainly represents the person that was tasked with herding the cats throughout the process. So I think I'd be shortchanging some of my colleagues if I said I did the most work on it. I was able to start brainstorming the idea, and then through a lot of internal collaboration, kind of brought a lot of folks in. Obviously, the framework itself touches on a lot of different domains. I grew up sort of a SOC person, a threat person. That's still kind of core to who I am and how I think of myself in this industry. So when it comes to things like GRC and data security and identity, I got to tag in experts to that stuff because that's just not an area that I know as much about. And luckily, I've got friends who do.
And it's interesting too, given what we're talking about here, which without going much further, can you just give us a brief overview of what AEGIS is and what inspired it?
Yeah. So what it is it's a 6-domain framework that is designed to give security leaders and their team as much of a head start as possible on securing sort of two different things: AI agents and agentic architectures and infrastructures, because those are different. They're pretty different in terms of the impact and what they mean, although there are a number of security overlaps to them. We go through the 6 domains, which are GRC, identity and access management, data security and privacy, application security, threat management and security operations, and then finally zero trust principles. So those are, sort of the 6 domains. And then what inspired it ultimately is that, so I've been covering securing enterprise adoption of AI now from a research perspective for about 3 to 4 years, really kind of around the dawn of ChatGPT, sort of 3.5, when that became a huge area of concern. And over the years, those questions have stayed pretty consistent, but started to change a bit here and there. And the bigger change that I started seeing more recently is that the questions about agents started to come in. Questions about MCP, questions about agents, questions about agentic really started to tick up more over the last sort of 3 to 6 months. And as we looked out there at the broader industry, at the market, we ultimately saw that there were a lot of things emerging to handle this from a security perspective, but nothing that necessarily aggregated them together and used various inputs as a single source of truth or a single framework that security leaders could use to deal with this. And that's ultimately what led to us producing the research. I think that the second really, really important inspiration for this, though, is cloud. And I say that for this very specific reason. Cloud existed for a long time before we really started thinking about securing it, around 14 to 15 years. It had its learner's permit, it had gotten its driver's license. And finally, around 2020, 2021, we decided, well, we should probably secure that. And then there was suddenly a race for security to get their arms around cloud. And I don't think we're going to have the lag time with agents and agentic that we had with cloud. So the other inspiration for this is closing that gap so it doesn't take us 10 years plus to start thinking about security. We can start doing that right now because we need to.
So we don't have the equivalent of open S3 buckets for the next decade.
At 100%.
Whatever equivalent that's going to be, maybe MCP servers that are the config management for it's open or something like that. Like we don't even fully know, or do we at this point, what the management plane, what the configuration side of this looks like yet, right? Like MCP isn't a year old yet.
Not even.
And yet,
yeah.
When you
and yet it's hit everyone's roadmap.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you reach out and it comes back with stuff. And I have not met a single enterprise yet. Maybe you have, Jeff, who is actually filtering the MCP response and looking for threats in that.
No, no. And this is, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Adrian. That's one of the other big things here is this stuff is coming, it's arrived. And when you think about something like MCP, less than a year old, we're sort of that proverbial cliche we always use. We're building the plane as we fly it. And I actually think that's one of the biggest mistakes in cyber is we often talk about this concept of, secure by design. And for me, with truly emerging technologies, not stuff that's been around for a while, but for truly, truly emerging technologies, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to think that we can secure it by design because it's being designed as it's deployed.
Yeah. It's not done yet.
It's not done yet. And so how do we secure that? Now, do I think MCP should come out of the gate without things like authentication? I've got thoughts. I think that's a bit of a problem. But at the same time, we don't know what protocol is dominant. And so we've got to start waiting. We've got to start figuring that out. And that's actually one of the really exciting things about this moment in time for us in security. For the last 20 plus years, we've kind of lived in a walled garden moment. We've been surrounded by these very, very specific sort of platforms. And we finally have a protocol war again, the way that tech used to, like 30 years ago when there were protocol wars. And we're at that moment, in security where we can have a meaningful impact. And this is where companies are born. This is where billions are made, good or bad. This is where solutions are innovated on and developed. And we are right there at that. I missed that first tech boom, right? I'm in my mid 40s now. That stuff had sort of shaken out by the 2000s when I was ready to enter the workforce and everything. I didn't get to participate, but here we are now and I get to. And I think that is the great part of this is it's really opportunistic for us. The downside is that we haven't been through this before. Everything's new. And it's really uncomfortable to take folks like us that have been in this world where we knew where things were and say, okay, we don't know what the protocol is going to be yet. We don't know what the control plane is because MCP itself
we don't know which
one
is Betamax and which one's VHS yet.
We don't know yet. Exactly right. And that's exciting, but it's super duper scary too.
Yeah, Ted Shorter from Coalfire, I interviewed him at Black Hat, and he said something that I've been repeating since, which is that MCP is the new HTTP, not the new HTTPS. And so I think that's, it's basically we're just using all of these things completely unsecured, and nobody's really figured out. And I think that's when you're in this boom, there's this huge fracture that happens, right? And this fragmentation, and it makes it exponentially harder to establish frameworks and protocols and all of these things because everybody's trying to do something different, because different means defensible intellectual property. It means your investors are happy. So I don't know how you balance the need to create things that are defensible from an IP perspective with the need to create some type of common protocol that protects everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the challenges. I also think as security, we kind of have to accept that, again, we're going to be a little bit behind where the rest of the organization is because we're going to have to react to what they're doing. And that's not a bad thing. That's an okay thing. We should be doing that. We should be sort of seeking out the architectural guidance and the developer guidance of what they're doing from an MCP perspective. And instead of saying, oh my goodness, it turns out that we've taken all these database servers that we used to want to keep from the internet as far away as possible. And we've actually created and started using a protocol that just puts them right out there, puts everything out there, gives them access to tools, gives them access to technologies, to APIs. Yeah, that's really uncomfortable. That's a bad thing. We shouldn't allow that. But what can we do? What technologies do we need? It's also going to be a great opportunity for innovation for us within security. We don't have a control plane right now. So that means someone's going to build it. And why not us? Why not someone that's inside a forward-looking security program today that's already adopted some of these technologies that solves their own problem? And that's the next great security vendor, which again, I just think that's incredibly exciting. But the other problem is when I'm on these calls and security leaders say, hey, what are we going to do about MCP security? What can I go buy? And I'm like, okay, so some news about that. You're not going to buy anything. And they're like, so I'm just going to hope. I'm like, well, I mean, yeah.
And you're also not going to tell the business no.
You're not going to tell them no because we can't do that. So yeah, I mean, but that's a real thing of like, yeah, the ecosystem isn't baked out yet. And that's a good and bad thing.
So Agentic has a cool pink center and needs to be flipped around a bit more is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And we've dealt with these problems before. So we kind of know how it works. And they will get solved, just maybe not as fast as we want or need it to.
And I think some of the problems are going to be 1990s problems, right?
Yep.
They're going to be credentials flying around, not well secured, things that are overprivileged. But I think some of the problems are kind of unique to this technology, because we have this, like how do we handle an agent now? Like I don't think it's useful to think of it as an employee, as a person. I think it's going to be like a combination of how a person uses different interfaces, especially as the desktop vision stuff starts making it in, and it's doing the equivalent of screen scraping and using mouse cursors and clicking things on websites that don't have APIs. And then what we discovered we could do with cloud, which is like, I don't know if you know, Sunil use DI triad, the distributed ephemeral, and what's the I? The I is immutable.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So big question there, because already we are seeing agents being useful to attackers. The NPM NX compromised, I think we talked about last week or week before last week, where there was a prompt in the malware. And the prompt assumed that Amazon Q or Claude Code, or I forget what the third one of those is going to be on an engineer or developer's machine. And it just prompts it and says, hey, I need you to go look for these files, package them up for me, and, create a new repo that only I have access to and put them there.
Yeah.
It's going to end up being TOTL, where you're not living off the land, you're thriving off the land.
That's a very good one. That's really good. I think you're absolutely right about that. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I deal with in this is that we are sort of doing the mental math of, we're kind of saying, okay, well, an agent does a thing that people do, therefore agents are people, and they're not. They're not people. And I think the most important thing about them not being people to remember is that when you think about the average enterprise employee, they have limited skill sets, right? For those of us that work in enterprise environments, we know that there are people that are still challenged by MFA today. Sadly for us in security, but there are people that generally, when they get the challenge on their phone and cloud, and they don't know what to do. So they have a limited skill cap. They have limited motivation, right? Most people just want to kind of get their job done. And they, so they're just these kind of limits that are baked in, right? We're just limited skill sets, limited motivation, limited time, right? They've only got so many hours that they're working. And when we shift over to agents, that's different, because they have uncapped skill sets. They have uncapped motivation, and they have kind of infinite scale, and they can be 24/7. So this idea that, securing agents is going to look like securing people, it's just wrong, because agents are fundamentally different. These are structures of compute.
People are not ephemeral.
People are not ephemeral.
They're not immutable.
They're not immutable.
We don't destroy people when they're done with the task. We don't destroy people. We're not there yet. We're not quite that far in dystopia.
Well, and agents will admit that they were wrong and then do the exact same thing again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And again.
Yeah.
Yes.
I built a custom gem yesterday. I said some pretty horrible things to Gemini yesterday. Like, I used a lot of expletives. I was very, very upset with Gemini.
I'm not worried
yesterday.
about people. I'm not worried about people harvesting what I put into my prompts. I'm more worried about them listening to what I say to the AI when it's not doing what I want it to do. Because that's really when I'm awful. The prompts, I'll be fine.
Can we get a psych eval for Jeff?
That's exactly
I literally called Gemini a useless POS yesterday, because
I've had the same conversation with Copilot.
After the 15th time, I was like, identification is spelled wrong. And it returned it again it has a problem with strawberry, same issue. Any word that has like multiple of the same letter in it, it's going to miss one of them. It's so frustrating. Yeah.
And that's what you just talked about there is one of the not so dirty secrets of agents. They're always wrong. Literally always wrong. The failure rate, or the accuracy rate, if you want to think about it that way, for agents, the failure rate is extraordinarily high based on all the research out there, right? Salesforce has research from earlier this year that shows that at best, agents failed 62% of the time. And that was with no confidentiality guardrails whatsoever. None. When you add in some sort of confidentiality guardrails, they fail even more often. They're even less accurate. Carnegie Mellon did a similar study, kind of considered to be the gold standard of agents at the time. And it showed that agents failed 70 to 90% of the time. So we're talking about unleashing these inside our enterprises. but they fail more often than a person can. And again, they're probably more productive than a person in theory, which means you're going to make more mistakes more often, faster with agents.
And Jeff, what drives me insane is I keep hearing people talking about these agents working while we sleep and doing stuff autonomously.
There you go.
And yet, clearly we have to have a human in the loop. And it's not clear to me that, the next step, the next GPT is going to solve this problem. I think we're stuck with that. Like, that's just how this stuff works. And it seems to me that we're going to have to be very careful with the use cases we give it, because there are use cases I use AI for where it does an okay job 100% of the time. Like if you ask it to create a job rec, just like but these are like assistant things where a human is always in the loop with them, right? Like you're not expecting it to produce the final thing. Or maybe you are, and it's just an image you need for a blog post, right? And you don't give a shit if it's an amazing piece of art, right? That's good enough. Let's get this blog post out.
But I think when you're talking about the enterprise environment where there are real stakes here, especially because one of the things that we talk about within the framework is
real
the fact
stakes that are cold and pink in the middle. Remember,
there you go. But when you look at it, right, we're doing like enterprise things, and some of the other challenges here are that the idea of root cause analysis or causal provenance from an agent, it doesn't exist. Like figuring out why did you do the thing you did isn't always easy to extract without enlisting the full support of developer teams, and even they may not be able to explain it fully.
So somebody pointed out to me the other day that even when it's thinking, that thinking can be hallucinated. What it's showing you is still being generated by it.
Absolutely.
And that had never occurred to me. I was treating the thinking as like debug, and you can't think of it like that.
No. One of the things I often say is that everything that these tools give you, it's all a hallucination. It's just some you agree with and some you don't, because it's all just tokens spit out in probabilistic order.
Useful.
Exactly
it's like
right.
cookies.
But everything is a hallucination. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like fortune
yes.
Like you'll find a way to make it fit.
Yes, exactly. But everything's a hallucination. And I think one of the other ways that agents are changing things from a work perspective is that we sort of think about our interactivity with AI, with LLMs, as something that we enter into a prompt, because that's how we've done it. It sounds like we've done this for decades. It's how we've done it for like 3 years now. We just type at the computer and it spits something out. But when we get into to actual agentic infrastructure and architectures, we're going to be passing data between agents, but there may not be a human that enters into a prompt. It may not be a situation where you command it to do something. Instead, it's going to do it based on data being available or based on some sort of status condition or reporting. And then the agent goes off and does something. And maybe that is brought to a person that then reviews it. So the underlying thing here is that we're also changing the way that we interact with these technologies. Here's the cool thing, I think, for security leaders, though. The cool thing or the opportunity for security leaders here is that we have to have trustability in these systems. We've got to have verifiability. We've got to have attestation. We've got to have integrity of the data. And that is something that security is really, really well positioned for. IT generally cares about availability. Dev generally cares about availability and function. Confidentiality and integrity. Who really owns that? Security has a real opportunity to step in to be that sort of guardian for integrity and represent that as part of their responsibilities, which again, that's going to be a real business thing, right? That's a way for us to directly link what we're doing to revenue.
Does that end up looking more like managing agents like an employee, where you have it, part of the alignment or system prompting is the acceptable use, like it has to read the policies just like an employee does and understand ethics just like an employee does? Because one of the things you point out in this report is that these things may go outside what we would consider ethical in order to complete their tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the other parts of this. So with agents, we encourage and incentivize emergent behavior. And so when you hear the phrase emergent behavior, you're like, okay, so it'll do stuff that we didn't program it to do. I don't know. I mean, people do that too, right? People do things that we wouldn't expect them to do. But in this scenario, think about it in context of security. You have guardrails in place. You have access control list, or you have identity-based controls in place where you don't want something to access certain data, except the goal of the agent, it needs that data. The planner that plans how to execute the next task says, I need to get that data. The judge says, this seems like it meets all of our requirements, go forth and execute. And so then the executor goes out and the agent does, except then it can't get to the data. So it goes back to the planner and it says, well, that didn't work. Give me a new plan. All of a sudden the planner's like, okay, I can't take path A to get to the thing I need. So what about path B and C? Okay, we'll do that. The judge says, seems okay. Executor goes out, executes the task. And all of a sudden it turns out that the reason why I couldn't take path A is because that was a security control.
Yeah.
Now the AI has decided to skip around that because we were inhibiting its goal.
So
even if you send it back to the docs that you were talking about, Adrian, if it takes the straight line through the matrix, the sparse matrix, but then you tell it no, all of the tokenization of those docs and policies and procedures are going to get reshuffled because it's going to take a less efficient path through that matrix, and it's going to reinterpret those docs and say, no, I couldn't do that, what was in the docs, and reinterpret them in a way that the discriminator feels is close enough to okay. So like agents, and this all happens in milliseconds. And that's the big difference, is that when your engineer starts doing crazy crap in a Snowflake database and exfiltrating data and changing parameters, somebody in the SOC is going to get an alert for that. And granted, it's one of 10 million alerts that are untriaged, but at least there's some time required to do that. This agent's doing all of this stuff in less than a second. And that's, to me, it's the velocity. I have a question. Side note question. This didn't come up in the report, but Jeff, have you talked to anybody about how this is impacting their cyber risk insurance?
We haven't talked about that yet. And I think part of that is because it's so new, it's tough to tell. Although one of the things that we are very curious about is whether we're going to see, business interruption or agent-based insurance policies such that if agents cause a business outage or cause a business interruption, you might have a policy that allows you some recoverability from that, right? I think those are the kind of things that are going to happen for sure. It's kind of weird because I think about it like this. I think about, we think about the person in accounts payable today. And they've never read an email they didn't like. They've never seen a spreadsheet they don't love enabling macros for. They love to put in shared credentials on every website. And we complain about that person today. But I see this sort of period 2 years from now when we're sort of sitting on rocking chairs as security pros, and we're like waxing nostalgic for the days when all we had to deal with was bill and accounts payable that clicked on everything. Because now agents are driving us crazy. And we're like, I've got 100 of them, and they're all doing this in milliseconds, literally at compute speed. And in the past, at least we knew they had to click on email, and they don't open that many emails. So we had some time, and then we got the alert, and the actor had to do some things, and they had hands on keyboard and some commands ran. That's not the world we're in anymore. This is a world where we're going to need more capability, more visibility, because it's happening so much faster.
More levels of undo.
Absolutely. Rollback procedures are going to be tremendous. I mean, that's a thing that we don't always think about, even in context of standard automation, that we have to start thinking about here.
99 levels of undo isn't going to be enough.
Yeah.
And the prompts aren't looked at as well as they should be either. I mean, prompt injection is a thing, and probably will be always a thing. And then when you have agents interacting with other agents, there's ways that an agent could ask another agent to do a thing that might be counter to what it's programmed to do or what it shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I stress as well, because I sometimes hear that, let's take the prompt injection challenge. That's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's an input validation problem to some extent. And we've had that problem for a long time in AppSec. We know we should sanitize inputs. So sometimes you'll hear folks say like, well, it's just a problem we've always had. We need to be better at it now. My thoughts on that is that's totally true. I think that's a reasonable perspective. But I also look at it as someone that works with CISOs on security budgets and things like that. I also look at it like, hey, let's not be that tactical, because why should we let a crisis go to waste? If it seems new, if it seems challenging, if we need more budget for it, let's mention that, this is a problem that's existed for a long time. We never solved it there. And now we've got to solve it in a whole other place. Because I think that's the important thing for security pros to do, is recognize that, we're going to learn some lessons over and over again that we should have learned before. But sometimes they're different, and we need to make sure we take advantage of that opportunity when it exists.
So some of what I'm hearing here is it sounds like the answer to hallucination and error checking, quality control with some of these agents are more agents. So agents are going to police other agents. To Jackie's point, when it gets stuck in a loop, there's another agent's job to kill it and restart it, to try and get the correct result. But let's assume that whole system works, right? Just like managing people, like there's people doing quality control, there's QA, UAT, and then eventually you get a right result. One of the things that concerns me here is just the costs of it, especially as we start to talk about scaling. And, we saw the same thing with cloud. We saw the same thing with, I remember people using SOAR 1.0 tools where their biggest frustration was they're incentivized to automate less, because the more they automate, the more they get charged. And already at this point, lots of people are suspecting, in fact, that's one of the stories we're going to talk about today, is nobody's making money on AI, that AI is heavily subsidized at the moment. And we're talking about having this stuff running all day. I don't know if anybody, can we afford to even do this, even if it does technically work, Jeff?
We can't afford it. And you're exactly right. All of this stuff is being subsidized, right? Every prompt that you return is brought to you by Uber and Lyft. It ought to just be a delivery. Because the same way the prices went up for those tools when they stopped being subsidized, the same thing is going to happen to us here. Right now, the goal for all of these companies is to subsidize growth via AI at the expense of margin, at the expense of funding. And we know that works. We know that investors will reward that because that's what we're seeing. But when you shake this out long enough, over a long enough timeline, companies are going to need to make money on this so that they could keep existing. And that means that stuff that you're getting for free today, whether it's a compute unit or a prompt or a token, or in reality, one of the 73 different tokens you have to buy and consume to use these technologies, that's not going to be cheap anymore. It's not going to be free. And all of a sudden, there's going to be a true up, or there's going to be an AI tax that gets applied. And security already isn't terribly familiar with consumption billing. We've had it for a little while now, so we're starting to get our arms around it, but we're certainly not as experienced with it as dev or as IT. And so when you suddenly have bundled pricing and compute unit pricing and flexible pricing and consumption pricing, and they're all added together and mixed together, and they're bronze, silver, gold, titanium, platinum, all the precious metals, and you've got to figure out how to tell that to procurement and explain it to the CFO, there's going to be an enormous transfer of capital from companies. And so that's a big downside too. Let's say that AI does make us more productive. Let's say it does allow us to maybe have fewer entry-level people. We've got some more experienced people instead. Well, those people are more expensive. So that's one trade-off, right? We're already paying a little bit more because more experienced people cost more than entry level. But on top of that, if you're trading all of that savings so you can pay the AI vendor more, or really pay NVIDIA more, if you go all the way downstream, right? So they could pay NVIDIA more. Did it really do anything for you? All you really did was sacrifice the culture and capability of your program to effectively fund a hardware purchase on someone, or a token exchange somewhere else. That's not too advantageous to our security programs, but that's going to happen. And I think we're a year-ish away from that. And that's a favorable timeline as macroeconomic tensions continue to rise. Companies are going to have to prove they're making money on this. And that's when the AI tax is coming, and security leaders are going to have to pay it.
Well, if China stops selling us data center components, all of this is moot.
Yep. Yeah. That's another great point, Jackie. When you look right now with sovereignty out there, if you're in France, they want you to have French data centers and French GPUs and French everything. That there's a cost for that. Spain, it doesn't matter the country. If we want more sovereignty, it means we've got to build data centers, we've got to build compute, we've got to build capability. Well, all of that is more expensive, and you're going to pay for that too if that's something that is happening. And we know that economies are getting more protectionist. So that's the other side of it. Just from an infrastructure perspective, as more and more of this stuff is built out, someone's going to wind up paying for it, and it's going to be you, the buyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I've got about 30 more questions, but we're out of time. We're just going to have you on again. So much we were able to pack into that. I urge everybody to check out the report. It dives into depth into a lot of these, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. So we barely scratched the surface here. Jeff, thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Loved it.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to cover the weekly enterprise news, a little bit shorter version today. Also, it's going to be very difficult to hit 30 minutes on that as well. See you in a few. Security Weekly and CyberRisk TV are headed back to one of the biggest identity security events of the year, Octane 2025, put on by Okta. Live September 24th through 26th from the vibrant city of Las Vegas, Octane 2025 brings together the best minds in identity, security, and technology innovation. And this year, we're turning up the volume. Security Weekly will be on site in full force with Mandy Logan and myself, Adrian Sanabria, leading the charge. Get ready for live-streamed executive interviews, exclusive on-site editorial coverage from SC Media, and brand new this year, a live-streamed episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It's your chance to engage with identity leaders, dive into the future of AI security, and hang out with your favorite Security Weekly hosts. And here's the best part. Security Weekly listeners get an exclusive discount. Just head to securityweekly.com/Octane, register, and use promo code OKTNSCMA25 to get your conference pass for $200. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW424 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for links to the articles that we're covering. I'm going too fast for my mouth to be able to say words, kind of like Jackie did on a motorcycle.
Hey, just fast enough. Nobody died.
All right. So we were going to do a topic segment, and we do have some Black Hat interviews after this. But there were just so many news items. We were not willing to skip the news this week. So hopefully folks appreciate that. There is some funding and M&A going on, and I dropped the notes in for that. We're not going to talk about it today because there's, I think, more interesting things and pressing things to discuss. And the first is kind of continues the last conversation we just had. Welcome, Eamon and Katie, by the way.
Hey there. Howdy.
Hello.
So for you guys who didn't hear the end of the last conversation there, we kind of ended up talking about, even if agentic is amazing and it's this huge productivity boost, can we even afford it? And so kind of coinciding with that, we've got a few news items here that I think are relevant. So Otter.ai got sued for recording millions of conversations without consent. So if Otter did that, like Crisp, I think I've talked about in the show before, I found out like it had been recording all my meetings for 6 months without my knowledge. And I had to go individually delete any of those. There wasn't even like a select all delete.
Wow.
At that point, I just use it to cut out noise. Like if sometimes I'm doing this podcast or a webcast from a noisy coffee shop, and Chris does an amazing job of cleaning up all that background noise, sound of me typing, that kind of thing. But they keep adding more stuff into it. Notion wants to record my calls. Crisp was recording my calls.
Zoom even has their own crap.
Yeah. Fireflies. There's all these tools recording calls. So this is a concerning precedent here. And on top of that, Anthropic, it hasn't actually happened yet. They haven't actually paid yet, but they agreed to pay authors at least $1.5 billion to settle an AI copyright suit. And obviously, they're not the only ones being sued for this. All the big AI companies are getting hit with these lawsuits. So this is another interesting. So we're already talking about the fact that AI costs are probably being subsidied, that they're not really charging what it's costing them for building these data centers for inference costs and stuff like that. So at some point, we're going to see the costs really, really jack up. But if they have to pay, if they have to settle a bunch of copyright claims and going forward for any training data, pay people for this data, it's going to make AI even more expensive.
It was very interesting with that article about the Anthropic having to pay $1.5 billion, primarily because they pirated something like 500,000 books and used that to train their model. And so that was something that they got hit. So I think that's why they got hit so hard with it.
Yeah.
But the other question is,
they proved that the books were pirated that they trained on?
I believe so, yeah. And that they had retained the books. So there was a couple different elements to that.
You always
And-
got to burn the evidence.
No,
Yeah, you got to
no
burn the
book
digital
burning.
books
No book burning.
Digital
Totally
book
different
burnings.
subject.
Yeah.
It's interesting though
in a virtual
because
dumpster fire.
it's interesting though because we're going to see more of this before we see less of it. And it really comes down to the value that people place in proprietary data. And I unfortunately don't see this going the way of authors, composers, etc., because we're going to become a universe that's obsessed with fast, obsessed with efficiency, obsessed with getting access to whatever we want whenever we want. I mean, just this morning I was
We're already
editing
there.
a paper not written by some. Well, yeah, but I was editing a paper this morning not written by somebody at my company. And everything was super awkward. Like, like literally one of my 12-year-old nieces could
It was start over from scratch bad?
So I typed it into chat. It was pretty bad. But I went into ChatGPT because I was only on my first mug of coffee. And I'm like, all right, clarify the exact phrase that this person had in their paper came up in ChatGPT. I'm like, all right, this is how we train stupid people. This is how we make sure people cannot think for themselves.
Yeah.
And people aren't really going to care because it's going to be fast and easy. And the value of the data that people are getting from AI, and that's what worries me about security, is that we're so concerned with what it can do, and companies are moving forward, that we're not worried about the outputs. And when it comes to a cybersecurity incident, the data is going to really matter. You know, the garbage in, garbage out isn't just a silly little marketing catchphrase.
Yeah, the report from Jeff Pollard in the executive summary has a paragraph where he goes into the importance of intent, of making sure that the intent, before this whole chain of agents do this expensive thing that's going to cost, I don't know, $100 plus every time an agent does something, every time this chain does something for us, that it really understands that intent, because you're just going to end up throwing away a lot. I think he was saying like 60% of the time agents are wrong.
I agree with Katie in the terms of like for the middle of the bell curve, for quartiles 2 and 3, they're like, I don't know that you could argue that the crap coming out of Lifetime and like the crap reality TV. I mean, in the 2000s, we went through like Spike TV and like Cops, and like, I think there's always just been trash for the middle of the bell curve that exists. And I also think that's like, we've got all these people who are arguably significantly above the average intelligence of, so in America, reading level is between 6th and 8th grade. That's the average intelligence of an American. And so we're all over here like, oh my God, how would generative AI spit this out? This is so obviously bad and wrong. But I would wonder if you gave that to an average person, if they would think that. And so it's probably like, the thing I worry about is that we're going to end up with this mindless dribble content for the middle of the bell curve, and it's only going to keep them there. And then, I do think that people are still going to gravitate more towards human content. And I actually hope that because there'll be so much AI crap available, it will raise the value of genuine human content. But I don't know. I don't know
I
that.
hadn't thought about that.
And I think we're going to go back to in-person events. I think people are going to go back to wanting to be in rooms with other people.
Yes.
I think we're going to
It's
go
already
back
happened.
to,
Yeah.
I think the reason
So it'll be just this landslide of mediocrity is what you're saying, which makes the genuine, like, thoughtful stuff even more important.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do think that there's always going to be that mid-market for people who just want mindless distraction, but I'm hoping that for people who produce good content, that will kind of make our content even more appealing. But
what I worry about, Jackie, with that is that we're not teaching, right? And I know some people might have a different view on education, but the whole idea of education isn't to learn a thing. It's to learn to think. And if we're not teaching people to learn to think and learn to reason, society as a whole isn't going to get smarter. And don't we want people to get smarter? Don't we want, not my kids, I don't have kids, but your kids and your kids' kids and their kids to be smarter and be able to do things? Because then when we lose things like manufacturing jobs, they can do those higher level things. And when AI does come to fulfill the promises of its expectations, we have people who can do those jobs and have that higher reasoning to be able to handle them. Isn't that what we want? We want people to progress past the twos and threes, right?
I think it's the opposite, because what I'm working on with AI right now is custom training. So what I'm doing right now is taking what are the skills in nursing that apply to cybersecurity, and how do we create custom retraining programs? That is, we're teaching ex-nurses cybersecurity concepts. We're like, hey, this is just like when you respond to a code blue. You would follow these policies and procedures, but when you're responding to a critical incident, you respond. So it can go both ways. And I think one of the biggest promises of AI is that I have hyper intelligent kids, which is way worse than you think it is. I just found out one of my kids got a perfect score on 2 out of 3 state tests, and she already skipped a grade. So we're at a complete loss as to how to keep her engaged enough in school, in class, that she's not distracting other people because she already finished her work. And so for me, one of the biggest promises of AI is she can sit at a computer and the AI can keep up with her and train her, teach her the way she wants to learn, teach her at her own pace. And so, I think if we let all of the hyperscalers gobble it up and sell it like crack to kids, probably not a great thing. But if we have teachers who really care about teaching in the most effective way possible, I think it also has the ability to fundamentally change our ability to educate kids and to give a more equitable education. Because right now in America, your zip code absolutely determines the quality of education you get. And so if we can fix that with AI, because all you need is a smartphone or a tablet, I'm all for that. So I think, I don't know, I'm a terminal optimist for as much of a snarky bitch as I can be.
Eamon, you had some...
At some level, the AI that's being used at different level at different areas or different for different people is similar to the search engine concept, right? I need to figure this out, and so if we're using AI from the perspective of I'm trying to learn more about this, so that way I can follow this path of knowledge gain that I want to follow, then that's a net benefit. I saw one of my kids' friends use her iPad in order to basically take pictures of the homework that was printed out in order to have AI give the answers. I don't think that's very helpful, but maybe that's something that is, a way of learning how to use AI to get further.
It's better than breaking into the classroom, Sean. It's better than that.
But my perspective is that if we're talking about when the search engines became popular and help guide people to knowledge, you shouldn't then use the search engine result to then go ahead and write the paper for you. Just like AI. You shouldn't have AI just write the paper for you, because you're skipping the whole step of getting the knowledge, learning how to write, learning how to put together information from different sources, because it should be more than just AI. And I don't know about you all, but I've noticed that the AI that I use at the bottom, it says the information from AI may not be accurate. So that's the other side of it, because it can hallucinate. It can source from different areas and put something together that just doesn't make any sense, and that's a problem too.
Yeah, but so does Facebook, and people believe that bull. Well, and that's what I mean, is that we're all sitting on the right side of the bell curve, but I think if you think about how the average person moves through the world, maybe AI increases the amount of bad information they have access to, but those are the same people that get their news from Facebook. So I don't know. Yeah. They're not fact checking.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just a couple hours ago, I saw Kevin Beaumont posted something on Mastodon where he was talking about in the UK, they have a huge insider threat problem that is the students, the smarter students on that end of the bell curve get bored and they hack systems and stuff like that. But at the same time, a bunch of people have tried to introduce cybersecurity into the curriculum, but they don't want to teach the kids hacking. So it seems like, the students are the resource problem, or are the solution to the resource problem that is also the students. But, we kind of have to, I think the education system is going to have a hard time keeping up with the pace of this.
Yeah, I read an article today that said that that there are kids as young as 7 that are basically hacking the school system and messing with schedules. So it's existing, and it is existing at a very young age.
Sure. Eamon, any thoughts here?
Too many. It's just,
you got kids.
Yeah.
You got kids at that age.
Yeah.
You and Jackie both. Yeah.
It's what Katie said. I kind of hung up on me. It's like, if we're going to educate, it's like, does our current system actually try to educate or I think she said, make them think on their own. I'm like, does our current education system actually do that?
Well, don't go there, Eamon. Don't go there.
I know. So that's what I'm.
There's a pessimistic take there.
Yeah. So I'm growing wary of. Anyway, I just been learning a lot. Like if you listen to a few Hidden Brain episodes about that, or even Akimbo, where he talks about the education system and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is, and I'm seeing it with teachers. I think we just need to embrace AI as a tool, and have our kids think, but also, how do people learn? How do people want to learn, right? And so adapting to that, and it's just a whole nother tangent that really
it is, but it's so important, and you bring up a really, really good point. Yes, I do want to agree with you. The intent of our school system is different than what it should be. I was talking about what I would hope it would be in a perfect world when we do want good things for future generations. But the learning system, it doesn't work for everybody. Unfortunately, no one-to-many system, whatever it is, whether it's education or anything else, fits. Hence Jackie's.
You can't really generalize U.S. education. Like my kids went to 2 elementary schools that are only 10 miles apart, and they might as well have gone to school in a third world country and a first world country.
Yep.
Rural farming town, not a lot of funds. Brand new elementary school in a really upscale suburb, and literally and that's part of the issue that I'm hoping AI can address in the U.S. is that if your parents aren't lucky enough to be able to afford to live in the right zip code, you get a pretty mediocre education with very low paid teachers who probably also got some pretty mediocre education. And there's such a disparity in the US between the haves and the have-nots of public education even. So I think when you're trying to generalize US education, you have to kind of go, okay, here's the top, median income, here's the middle, and look at it that way, because it's drastically different.
I think if you put it in the access to resources, right? If you put it like that as a basic, there's a good TED talk on, they took a computer and put it in a slum in India, the middle, there was no other computer around nearby. And they just left it there. And the kids there just learned how to use a computer on their own completely. Mm-hmm. It was just phenomenal. So what if we provided access to these tools to more people? That's the optimistic point of view, That
is super optimistic, and I love it. But
that was
I'll go back to
the one laptop per child. Remember that?
Just on Slack.
Yeah, my mom used to drop me off at Radio Shack while she grocery shopped. It was the grocery store was in the same.
Now we
strip
understand
mall.
You, Jackie.
Well, yeah,
now,
I mean,
now we
my
know
mom
why you
used
are
to,
the way you are.
That was my first.
We need to bring.
That was one of my first jobs too. When I was 16, I got a job at Radio Shack because that's where I learned to use a computer. That's where I learned to build circuits. That's where I learned how to get the right power adapter for your electronics and what polarity meant. And so, yeah, I mean, I think just creating opportunities for kids to FAFO with technology. Most of them have a natural curiosity that they're only limited by the environment that
eventually gets extinguished by the education system.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's that more pessimistic route, but it
wow, we just
does.
spent 2/3 of our time on one news story. We are not doing this in half an hour.
Yeah. So no, I do want to pivot.
I win.
I do want to pivot to Katie's story here. So this NPM breach was pretty interesting. And it turned out to be 20 NPM packages that got compromised in this supply chain attack. Everything happened pretty quickly, and I'm not sure if we have really a good idea of what the impact was. I heard that there have been cryptocurrency losses, so that was the target of the malware. It's always funny. Every time we see this amazing attack, they're in the end they're after something dumb like cryptocurrency.
I know.
They mine $3 worth of Monero or something like that, and you're like, you had access to 1 billion developers' laptops, and you mined $2 of Monero. What are you doing? So
it sounded like they locked it down really fast, though, right?
Yeah. I think
within
I read
an
that
hour.
It hit at 9 a.m. and then by 11:30, they had figured it out and shut it down.
Yeah, within a couple hours. But so the headline that we see is like billions of downloads per week for all these packages combined. So clearly they targeted very popular packages on purpose. So 19 of these were maintained by one person, and they're extremely simple packages that do just very fundamental things. These are not complex libraries. But and then just one person with one other package. But like, even if it's just an hour, and GitHub came out and said nobody actually downloaded the malware. I just don't see how that's possible, given that if you break it down to the minute, I did the math, and it was still 250,000 downloads per minute. Of course, the downloads aren't going to be spread evenly across every minute throughout the day, throughout the week, but it's not zero. It couldn't have been zero. And there are reports of people actually losing cryptocurrency. So it's, I'm not sure we have a good idea of how broadly this hit. Clearly it wasn't like the end of the world. They fixed it pretty quick. And I don't know, maybe it's something where 6 months later, we find out somebody lost millions of dollars of Bitcoin or something. I don't know. But it was interesting because all it was,
I'm not sure we're gonna see this one pop up. I'm not sure we're going to see this particular one pop up, and it was one of these things where it was like, oh my God, rapid response, let's get on this. And it fizzled out as quickly as it came up. There was a little bit of FUD here. I think what we should take from this isn't the sophistication of this or the crazy nature of what could have, should have, but just, all right, let's get back to basics. I've been yelling that for 10 years. So, because this was a phishing attack. It was a basic phishing attack. In particular, this one, 2FA. So, be careful of what you're doing and how you're doing it, where you're going. Check the sites that you're being redirected to. Always, make sure your sources are correct. What I was
the site looked correct
as our security researchers were. It was a .help instead of .com, and the .com was the correct one. So
it was an extremely well done.
It was well done.
Yeah. It was npm.js.help.
You say,
but it was registered 3 days before the attack, and that's we all know that's a red flag, and usually that should prevent you from even getting to that site with a lot of security controls, right?
True.
If they're set up correctly.
Enterprise security controls, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Not every. So that's
enterprise security
that's
controls that are also set up correctly.
All right.
That's something I was talking about like over a decade ago is that we long since passed the point where enterprise security is a thing that just happens on corporate owned devices, right? Like, we have to worry about people's personal stuff as well. And then like some of the people that get hit by this, maybe they're full-time open source developers, and they're working 100% off of grants and, donations and stuff like that. Like they still arguably they need even more protection than like enterprise security controls. If they're controlling some critical piece of, that bit in the XKCD drawing that's holding up the whole stack, right?
Absolutely.
So very much an unsolved problem there. So a lot of details on this. This is a good one to study. The guy that got hit, the main person with the 19 packages that got hit, what was his name? Josh Junin. I'm sure he's super glad that I had his name handy and said it out loud. But he was super helpful, super transparent. He said, here's a screenshot of what I got hit with. He even pasted the full raw email. You can get the email with the full headers. You can look at the email, see what it looked like. So he was extremely apologetic and helpful in sharing everything he knew so that the community could learn from it. And I think we can look at this as a win because there was somebody in Poland that discovered it and filed an issue ticket, and there was somebody else, Charlie Erickson, that noticed it. But because of the time, it was mostly people in Europe, but they noticed it so quick, and then GitHub responded really quick. I think we can frame this as a win.
Cool. Let's move
It
on.
shows how vulnerable you are, though.
I love you, but I really want to talk about my news story.
Okay, let's what's your news story?
I have two of them. One was more of a PSA. So I was using Google Password Manager, and I was trying to go through all of Google Password Manager. When you have any passwords that it finds in a data breach on the dark web, it'll alert you and it'll say, hey, this has been found in a data breach. So it gave me this website, UASECHO, which used to be a student loan service provider. So I went to UASECHO, and that is now a pretty well done Google Chrome info stealer site. So it'll bring up, it'll say, hey, you need to install the WebOS Toolkit browser extension. I actually sent this over to a handful of my threat researcher friends, but just be aware that the website that Google gives you for the account credential that has been compromised, that is when it was compromised. Those domains sometimes go dormant and attackers love to pick them up. So be very, very careful about trying to remediate those passwords, and please be sure you verify the websites you're going to do so. I don't know that any attacker has used this as an attack vector, but it would be effing brilliant if they did and leaked onto the dark web. Like, please, I almost am like, shouldn't put this into the ether, but if you had a data leak onto a dark web and you just kind of put in your own shitty phishing site in there, it would be pretty easy to find. So that was my first one. My other one was talking about the Burger King hack. So so this is one of the news stories we have. I'm going to TLDR this super fast. So two white hat hackers, Bob and Bob, they were able to successfully hack RBI.
Probably not their real names.
Yeah, no, not their real names, but they're two white hat hackers. RBI, Restaurant Brands International, they own Burger King and Long John Silver's, I think, and a handful of other restaurants. Popeyes. So, support as you will. But these white hat hackers basically found that the security practices of RBI were atrocious. And you can read the news stories to find out more, but I think their comment was that they were...
The link in the news is the original blog post.
It is the original blog post.
I found it archived somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So these hackers did
don't
what
sue
they were...
us, but
they did what they were supposed to. Oh. They reported everything they found to the FBI. They also reported everything they found to Restaurant Brands International or Incorporated.
And they fixed it super quick.
Yeah, very fast. And instead of thanking the hackers for letting them know, they never responded to the hackers. And then RBI used a DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. They used a DMCA takedown to take down the blog post that these people posted about their security for using the trademark Burger King. And so two things. One, this is insane. They were able to listen to conversations in the drive-thru. And I was actually talking to a couple of my other friends who were saying that a couple years ago, they were like changing the menu boards at a Burger King, sitting in the restaurant, screwing around on the Wi-Fi. But two, what kind of an a-hole do you have to be to use a DMCA takedown to go after the people who let you know how bad your security practice was? Like, I'm working on a pretty long piece on this, and I really hope this is like the most epic version of the Streisand effect that ever happened, because this is doing our part to me. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2025, this is not, I do so many advisory calls on this at IANS, and it just shocks me every time, like how much of a surprise it is to people when we have this conversation where I share the security researcher, that perspective and why some security researchers are just like fully anonymous, full disclosure, send it to the full disclosure list, not my problem. Let somebody go fix it. Like they won't even try to contact RBI, Burger King in this case. Like the fact that these folks even tried, like that's already a feather in your cap. Like you already have the beginnings of what could be a great relationship and improving your standing within the security community. But the moment you go after security researchers, like it's just like telling people your systems are unhacked. Like you're painting a target. Like it's just so uncalled for and just not helpful.
Yeah, the amazing thing about the write-up is that every step of the process that they went through had horrible security. So it wasn't like it was just one thing. There were passwords that were in the client-side HTML for interacting with the system. They had something where you could just sign up with an email, and then they figured out that you could sign up without even having a valid email address. So like every step of this, they found access tokens that weren't set up for certain systems and could be used across the entire system. Every level of it had security issues. So it wasn't just we found this one thing and got in through there and could do all this. It was every level of the way the security was configured was very poor.
So two things. The one, so a tiny, tiny silver lining, at least they didn't use the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, on them. But two, they make this, they basically, these kind of actions make our society less secure because people are less encouraged to report vulnerabilities because, listen, as an individual person, nobody wants to get sued. They're like, forget that, I know people that have found things and because of their color or whatever, status or gender, whatever you call it, they're just afraid to report it. So they just sit on it or just ignore it, so.
Go to disclose.io if you have any questions or want to share with anybody the proper way to handle vulnerability disclosure.
There you go.
That's so it's not BugCrowd, but it is Casey Ellis's project. He's the one that set it up, but it's all free content. I think it's like a separate nonprofit or something like that. Lots of great resources, templates for you to put a vulnerability disclosure policy in your website to make it easier for folks to contact you, and everything you need to know to not handle it like RBI handled it.
Is there a way for people to to disclose it anonymously? Is there some mechanism for people to do that?
There are plenty of mechanisms to do that. I don't think disclose, I think, might actually help you do that. One of the reasons that BugCrowd and HackerOne exist is because of this problem, to exist as mediators to ensure that the person reporting it isn't punished for doing the right thing for reporting it.
Like, has their website taken down?
Yeah, right. And I think it's been a while since I've gone through Disclose, but I think they do have some details on that. Yeah, there's a get disclosure assistance option on the website, and they have like a whole community forum where you can get help.
That's great.
Yep. And with that, I think that's all we've got time for. I'm glad we got to cover those this week. I think it was very necessary to cover those items. And next week, we'll be talking to Todd Beardsley from RunZero about the death of vulnerability management. Very dramatic title. Obviously, it's not dying, but it does need to change. It does need some fixing. Yeah. I'm very excited about that one. Todd's a lot of fun. He does a lot of cool stuff in the community, gives some interesting talks.
We love Todd.
Looking forward to that. We love Todd.
He's a good dude.
So up next, after the news here, we've got 2 interviews from Black Hat. Matt Alderman talks to Rohit Damankar from Fortra about AI-powered threat simulation and continuous penetration testing. Then Matt also sits down with Michael Leland from Island about dealing with the realities of compromised credentials. And big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thanks to Eamon, Sean, Jackie, Katie for joining me today. And we'll see you next time. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1password.
Welcome back to Black Hat 2025. It's day 2. We're still here recording live from the Cyberist studio at Mandalay Bay in lovely, hot Las Vegas, Nevada. Smoke's a little better today, but it's still a little hazy. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview segment is Rohit Damankar. He is the Vice President of Product Strategy at Fortra. Welcome, Rohit.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've had your boss on before. I love John. We've had a lot of great conversations. It's a pleasure to have you on. We're going to talk about offensive security. Why? What's going on with offensive security? Why is it now becoming more of a hot topic? I had a conversation about this yesterday, actually.
You know, whenever anything becomes a hot topic in security, usually there is some kind of compliance push behind it. It is a sad thing, in a sense, but that's what is happening. The compliance is now pushing offensive security as an essential part of, regulatory compliances through multiple different channels.
So once it becomes a mandate and a regulatory requirement, like, I don't know, say vulnerability management, now a bunch of people start to build companies around it. But you guys already have capabilities here, obviously, in this space. What's driving the need for this to be embedded into regulations?
I think, first of all, let me tell you that, and you have been in this industry for a while, when something comes to a regulatory compliance, it's a little too late already, the need for it. Mm-hmm. And let me give you an example. Earlier this year, we had the new PCI DSS 4.0 emerge. And it said you have to protect client-side scripts now with PCI DSS compliance. But if you remember, there were Magecart attacks that were 6 years before. So the need for having that really across the board was almost 5 to 6 years ago.
Right.
And it takes a while, and I'm not dinging here any compliance standard, but it takes a while for it to get into the regulatory compliance. So I think in the first place that the offensive security needs are a must today. And they are getting attention, of course, now with more regulatory compliances. And again, not just in the US, this is across the globe. So you have compliances in UK, compliances actually in EU, compliances in Asia that are driving this need.
Got it. Now, offensive security, people think of penetration testing and red teaming. They're not exactly the same. So are those the two kind of components that are they specifically mandated that way? Like you have to do annual pen testing or quarterly pen testing and you need to do red teaming? Is it one or the other?
So I think pen testing has been a part of some of the compliances, and now red team is getting on the bandwagon as well.
Got it.
There is a difference between the two. If you think about pen testing, they are more like logs. So it's like testing your logs, right? So people go and deploy lots of security controls across their entire environment, as you know. And now the need is growing because now there's a lot more cloud, SaaS, etc. So there are security controls all over the place. Pen testing is testing those controls. Are they working or not?
Right.
However, red teaming is completely different from that. It is attacking the environment with an attacker's mindset. And as we were just talking about before we started the interview, this is such an asymmetric thing that the attackers have to find one small hole to get in. And so the red teaming exercises are meant for really simulating the actual attack the way they happen.
Right.
They're not just testing your logs. They're testing actually how you get in.
Right. Can I move laterally? Can I get somewhere else? Can I get another foothold, et
Correct.
cetera?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they're testing the entire sort of kill chain in the process. And the beauty of it, in a sense, is so far, if you look at it, the security industry and especially the auditors, we all survived on hope. And by hope, I mean, people said, yeah, I have my security controls in place. My environment is secure. I have this firewall. I have that next generation technology across the board, et cetera, et cetera. And there was no proof given to saying, okay, does it really work? Does it really work at the time of need, right? And so when you think about now the pen testing, red teaming, the offensive security as a whole, that's the equation it's bringing. So your auditors can ask you saying, okay, you're telling me your security controls, your defensive controls are in place. Show me the proof that they are working.
Yeah.
Show me that you have done something about it to know their efficacy.
But quarterly or annual pen testing isn't enough. So I've seen this emergence of continuous penetration testing, right? And so we've seen this from a few different vendors in the space because things are changing every single day, actually multiple times a day. If we think about where we are with DevOps and how applications are deployed and where our assets are all over the place, things are constantly changing. So how do you speak towards this concept and need for continuous penetration testing? And then I want to go into the red teaming side a little bit, but how important is it to test often?
So I think in today's environment, and especially, as you mentioned, there are code changes that are happening like multiple times a day, you know, the continuous part becomes very important. But at the same time, I don't want to overwhelm people with that need saying, oh, I need to do continuous now. So it's like, as you know, security, basically there is a maturity curve. You start with something, you kind of track your strategy, make sure that everybody's aligned on that strategy, including your board. They understand what the risks from that strategy are, and then you mature. And so to me, if somebody is not really doing the pen testing or red teaming today, start there, right? Yeah. I mean, at least do twice a year, 4 times a year, whatever your frequency is. And then you evolve your system, evolve your processes, people, to doing the more continuous approach. Yeah. But continuous approach in my mind is necessary today. Very much, again, a necessary thing. Although, again, a lot of these compliance and regulatory mandates will not say such a thing.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. No, they're probably going to say annual or quarterly or
in
whatever.
In 5 years, they might say that.
Yeah, they might. Yeah. Maybe we get them to continuous. So now let's talk about the nuances of red teaming, because red teaming now requires people in the mix, right? And so people are taking the data, they're traversing the network, they're figuring out the moves. That gets a little more resource intensive to do, and therefore probably gets a little harder when it comes to continuous red teaming, doesn't it? Because you probably can't afford all those resources to constantly be red teaming the entire environment. So what are the strategies you see around frequency and scope for red teaming?
So I think I would say that in terms of red teaming, you're correct. You do need that expertise for breaking into the environments to try to figure out all the paths that are open and then kind of bring that to light. However, again, these are also your skilled resources.
Mm-hmm. Highly skilled
resources. Yeah. These are not available, for every organization. So again, to me,
you saw one of them walk out the door before this interview. HD Moore was in that chair right before you.
Yes, absolutely. So. I said hi to him. Yeah, so exactly. You don't have HD Moores, running around.
Right.
So again, here to me, it's a question of strategy, right? What you do is you figure out what your organization capabilities are, what your aspirations are. Not everyone is going to want to become a house of red teaming experts. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where you go out and outsource that need. And you make a plan for it. You say, okay, I'm going to outsource this kind of a need. These are my requirements. This is what I expect out of the company doing it. And then you figure out eventually, do you want to absorb that capability in-house, just depending on your need.
Yeah, right.
Like if you're one of those software vendors who's releasing software very frequently, maybe that need is right, inside your organization to break that software before it goes out.
Yeah. So I heard this term yesterday, vibe red teaming. which was an interesting term. I hadn't heard it before, but the concept was, how do you leverage AI in your red teaming exercises to help accelerate some of these tests? What do you think about that? Is that a viable strategy for people, is to use some of these AI capabilities to help kind of build out your red teaming capabilities at higher scale?
Yeah, I was waiting for the AI word. It's 10 minutes too late into the conversation, right?
We're only 9 minutes in, so we're good.
Yeah, okay. So yes, I think the AI can be leveraged again for this automated purpose that we are talking about.
Right.
Because people have been doing vulnerability management for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And one of the major things of vulnerability management, the outcomes needs to be saying, how do I prioritize my patches? Whether they are actual patches, whether you're doing virtual patching through any other mechanism, right? And now the AI, right, it can learn these vulnerabilities if you have access to the right kind of, exploit testing tools.
Right.
Let's start with pen testing the first,
Right.
You can go and automate it saying that, okay.
Automate the payload creation, right?
Exactly. The vulnerability is discovered,
Yeah.
the exploit goes out, figures out if the system is vulnerable, reports back. And so you basically get a map in your environment of something that's really vulnerable, that is attackable, exploitable, etc. And
Right.
that can kind of, the AI can then drive saying that, okay, here's what you need to do in terms of actions.
Right. Okay.
So
Good.
it is very much, and the same thing can be done even in terms of, the actual building of red teaming tools, etc.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk purple teaming for a second, because there's also been this movement about these red team, blue team combinations. And I'm seeing this evolution of even like these purple teaming platforms, right, where they can collaborate with each other. So you've got the offensive folks, red doing the red teaming exercises in coordination with the defenders on the blue teaming side. Where are we when it comes to, like I said, I've seen these kind of platforms start to come up, but then I haven't heard much about them lately. Is purple teaming still a thing?
Yes, I mean, purple teaming is still a word. I mean, it is still a culture that we really need to kind of embrace.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And why I say it's a culture, right? It's because, again, as I said, the industry, we have lived on the blue side for a long time.
Yes.
We have had, vulnerability management and a host of defensive controls for many, many years, right?
Yeah.
So this concept takes that and says, okay, hey, somebody go and really attack me, really look at my controls, test their efficacy, test how all other ways you can get into the environment, right? And there needs to be that collaboration between the two, a constant collaboration saying, hey, you know what, I was able to get in this way. How do we kind of, stop that?
Right.
So that dance is what's labeled today under the purple color, red
Right.
plus blue together.
Yeah.
And that needs to be, again, it need not be an internal capability.
Right.
You can kind of, think of providers of
Yeah.
red teaming. And my advice there would be to kind of treat them as your partners, treat them as internal part of your organization so that you have that stronger collaboration. And that's what would give the purple culture which is needed.
So if I'm looking to build out an offensive capability and look for red teaming, and I don't have the resources to do it, I can look for providers to do that. Would they bring then some sort of purple teaming platform that would be leveraged as part of coordinating the activities between your defense team and the service team? Do they bring their own kind of platform to bear on that front?
Yeah, I think everybody is different again here. Some of them actually are using tools. Some of them will have platforms so that
Yeah.
you have access to, results
Yeah,
and things
right.
like that later. There are also breach and attack simulation platforms
Yep,
in the market,
yep,
right?
yeah.
That's also to me another example of, similar
Yeah.
kind of an activity.
Right.
I tend to kind of go with less number of acronyms.
Yeah.
So like there is, red teaming, pen testing, breach
Well, see,
and attack
Gartner's starting to go to
simulation.
4-letter acronyms now. So, now we got the CNAP and CTEM, and so
Yeah,
they're going.
exactly.
They're moving away from TLAs. They're going to 4-letter acronyms now.
Yeah, sure. And there are many.
Yes, there are. Now let's flip that question. Right,
Okay.
I build a red teaming set of capabilities in house. Now I should probably bring in my own platform to help, from a purple teaming perspective, working with my defensive teams. Is that the right strategy for people who are building their own red teaming capabilities?
I would say so. I think a platform, what I think of platform is more like a utilitarian tool that facilitates, collaboration, that facilitates workflows.
Yeah.
So like when I find something out of my red teaming exercise, how do I easily communicate it to the blue team, right?
Blue team,
for actions and stuff like that. So to me, that is where the platform plays a role.
I mean, I guess you could still get your PDF report and scroll through the report and the findings, but that's
AI, or apply AI to that.
Oh yeah, why not? I'll just send the PDF to ChatGPT and let it just create a bunch of tickets in Jira for me or
Correct,
something.
exactly.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
So it can take any different forms.
Okay. But the main goal here is organizations really need to think about their offensive security strategies, because now regulations are starting to force this. And if you haven't thought about building an offensive security strategy, now's the time.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Rohit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/FortraBH. For all Black Hat 2025 coverage, please visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Rohit, thank you again.
Thank you, Mike.
Welcome to Black Hat 2025. It's day 3. We're still here. Floor undisclosed, recording live from the Cyberist TV studio at Mandalay Bay here in sunny, hot Las Vegas. It's getting hotter. The smoke's settling down a little bit, actually. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview segment is Michael Leland. He is the Vice President, Field Chief Technology Officer at Island. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, sir.
So we're going to talk about compromised credentials, browsers. Let me start with a little, I saw the facts, right? I work for a human risk management company, which was a combination of security awareness and training and trying to detect human behavior. We've done a horrible job in security awareness and training phishing. Like, if you look at the last 16 years of the Verizon breach report, we stink, right? So we have to assume that credentials are going to be compromised. So let's just put that out on the table now. Compromised credentials are always going to happen. There's no way to stop them. So the question is, how do we stop them?
So I think the assumption that the breach has already happened, the assumption that the credentials have already been hacked, the assumption that they're probably already available on the dark web and you can find them somewhere, leads us to the reality that attackers are no longer breaking in, but they're logging in. Right. So how do you protect credentials if you know they're already exposed in the wild? First thing you can do is enforce a solid, mature, multi-factor authentication strategy, right? Where you need at least the credentials and something else, whether that's biometric or worst case, but best case scenario, SMS PIN code. At least something that's giving you one more factor is always essential.
Right.
But the problem is many applications that are not SSO enabled, that don't have MFA, or maybe there's an application that only asserts MFA at the initial login. But you know that if they browse over to this little corner of the application, that's where the sensitive data is. Maybe it's at that time that you assert a presentation layer MFA, something else that validates the user. So even though they may have access to an application, you can still enforce they don't have access to sensitive information.
Certain parts of that app, yeah.
But the most important thing, and you pointed this out, security awareness training is great. I don't like to diminish it by calling it lipstick on a pig, but at some point it's not enough. And it never will be enough.
Right.
So the users are always our weakest link. Right, they're going to click things they shouldn't. Yep. Even well-trained, well-educated knowledge workers are going to click that link because it looks legitimate.
It does.
AI has made it look that much
way
more legitimate.
Yeah, even the smishing attacks, the SMS-based attacks. Now the unsubscribe links. So you looks like you're getting this malicious thing, or it's like, wait a minute, I don't have that account. Then they put an unsubscribe link in there. Don't click on that either, folks, because that's doing the exact same thing. It's crazy. These attacks are getting so sophisticated. That's why I said we just have to assume credentials are compromised.
We also can't trust our eyes and ears anymore, right? Deep fakes have gotten to such a point that if your CFO calls you on the phone and says, I need this amount transferred, sounds like him,
right.
Let's do a Zoom call. Right. It looks like him.
Right.
You have no way of knowing if it's legitimate.
Right.
So if you assume that your credentials are compromised, if you assume you can't trust your eyes and ears, and you assume you can't click any links, how do you protect?
Right.
So users are the weakest link. but the second weakest link in our entire fabric of knowledge worker communication is the consumer browser itself, right? So what if you could define this application data boundary? What if you could say that these are the trusted applications, they're only allowed to live, inside this secure enclave. We need to protect the intentional or unintentional movement of data out of those. So that means copying or controlling everything from cut, copy, paste, file, print, save, all of those things. But if they browse outside of that secure enclave and try using their corporate credentials, either in an unsanctioned but legitimate application, so maybe your policy is that OneDrive is where you store all sensitive information. Right. What if that user tries going to Box and creating another Box account with their corporate credentials? That is the exact same use case as a potential phishing attack. It is an unsanctioned domain or destination that they're trying to put their credentials in. When you enforce a policy at the presentation layer, that means that you're watching every keystroke they're typing. You're seeing where they're entering those credentials into. And if you identify that they're trying to either create a Box account with corporate credentials, or they've clicked on a link that brings them to a login page that looks legitimate, but it's a harvesting site, the minute they actually type their username, the last letter of the top level domain, mleland@island.io, the O will trigger the policy. It says, look, you're trying to use your credentials somewhere you shouldn't, right?
So it's capturing it in real time.
In real time, yes. Yep. So while we can't always prevent the credentials from being harvested, can we prevent the credentials from being utilized? The other big thing is, if you control what browser they're allowed to access business applications from, all of a sudden you can say that those same credentials, legitimate or not, or the usage of them is legitimate or not, can't be used in a secondary browser. You now have full control because you control the gate. Right.
So do you recommend then, so obviously you guys are the enterprise browser company, so use Island for all your corporate apps, but then allow the consumer browsers to be used for other sanctioned things? Or do you try to centralize everything around a centralized enterprise browser, right? Because I could see some organizations saying, well, we'll allow them to use a consumer browser for non-work related stuff because we allow it. Some organizations may or may not, but can you then kind of split and enforce that, where you can't use the corporate credentials in a consumer browser also?
So when I mentioned there's two weakest links, we talked about the user side. The other is the extensions and plugins. Right? So we saw this past December, the CyberHaven breach. Even a legitimate, trusted extension can be compromised with a simple OAuth hack that allows a compromised extension to be re-uploaded and then get distributed to all of the users. The number one reason for those compromised extensions is either deploying crypto Bitcoin loggers or creators and info stealers. Right. Info stealers represented the highest amount of credential theft in the last 24 months. So, to your point about what browser you get to use, if you can enforce both extension protection as well as that level of presentation layer DLP, either in a full enterprise browser or in a consumer browser with the enterprise extension installed, then maybe you get the best of both worlds. But the way we see our customers typically do it is they leverage the extension and the browser to identify what their risk posture is, right? What are the applications primarily being used? So the old world of shadow IT, right? Show me all the sanctioned applications.
See, I'm going to Salesforce, I'm going to HubSpot, I'm going to, I'm using all these SaaS-based apps. So I get an inventory of all the apps that a user's using, right? Which now allows you to start to think about some policy enforcement, right?
That's exactly right. So you learn from the telemetry you gather to pick the first use case. You say, looks like the predominant usage of applications that put my data at risk, Salesforce, SAP, Workday. Maybe you decide that's the small microcosm. So you build a small policy that says these applications now can only be accessed through the enterprise browser. And the way you do that could be any number of ways. Conditional access in your IDP that say all authentication requests to these applications must come from a known Island browser. Could be certificate pinning, or it could be that extension that we install that when you try going there from a consumer browser, it gives you this gentle nudge. It says, by the way, corporate policy now says that to be safe, you've got to, and we'll even launch that browser and load that web page for you.
Nice. Let's talk about plugins. Because that's the other thing you kind of mentioned is also getting an inventory of those plugins and controlling those plugins. Right. I think the interview right before this, they were talking about one of the coupon cutters is out of China, and it's harvesting data, right? That's a plugin people are putting in their browser. So I assume Island can help enforce which plugins can be used and not used to help prevent other data harvesting activities.
So, back to the Cyberhaven incident again. We learned from that event just how easy it is to compromise a legitimate extension or how many illegitimate extensions have already been published. There are 230,000 extensions published to the Google Chrome Store. We took it upon ourselves to do a risk assessment of every one of them. And we are building a static risk score based on everything from the probability of risk. That is, what are the permissions it's requesting? Where is it asking to assert those permissions? What's the validity of the domain it's registered to? Is there a legitimate privacy policy? What's the frequency update and cadence of release? How many users are using it? Has it ever been promoted on Google's web store? How many star ratings? So all of a sudden you have this concept of what the risk posture of each extension is. Now when you do an inventory across your entire browser fleet, not just the Island browser, but also the consumer browsers that have the Island extension.
They have the extension,
you can now see kind of what your risk exposure is. Then you go one step further and build a policy that says, I have a risk appetite of, let's say, 60%. And so any extension that falls above that line in risk, you can say, no, this is a
block it.
You're not allowed to run it.
Yeah.
But in the Cyberhaven incident, let's say that the extension right now comes in below that score, but for some reason, the latest update of that extension puts it above your risk appetite. You can say, no, pin it at the earlier version. Don't let the new one get installed. All future installations will fail because it falls above the line, and all existing installations will stay pinned at the lower one.
Which means you have to analyze all 230,000 plugins on a real-time basis in order to know whether the latest version is now outside of.
Twice a day, we are evaluating all deltas of new extensions that have been published.
Got it. And then is that available? So it's tied into the browser and the extension so that that data can then be used that way.
Exactly right. But what's more important too is understanding when and where certain extensions should be allowed to operate in your environment. There are some extensions that offer, great productivity improvements like, dictionary and spell check and thesaurus and grammar check, right?
Password
managers. So it may be perfectly fine for those to run when you're outside the business domain. You may not want a tool that is in essence a keylogger, right? It evaluates our keystrokes and tells us what version of there to use. That'd be perfect fine when you're in a Gmail, but may not be okay when you're in SAP or Salesforce. So not only allowing you to set a threshold that says above which risk I'm not comfortable assuming, but also to say I'm going to allow certain extensions, but not inside that business domain, but perfectly fine outside of it. So to your question earlier, can you allow customers to use one application like Island Browser for business applications, but still use consumers? Yes, you can. But most of our customers tell us that once they start using the Island Browser, they're getting more productivity improvement out of it. They're getting better ad blocking, better password management, better clipboard, all of those things that are helping them do their work as well as their personal life. And most customers tell us they never go back to Chrome, Edge, or Safari.
Interesting. So that's a really interesting point is, if I use the enterprise browser for work, can I then use it at home?
So it's not a consumer browser.
Okay.
But if you're in the world like we are today, where a knowledge worker has one machine, he carries it to work and back to home, there's absolutely no problem with him using it for personal use as well. In fact, we enable a BYOD workforce to allow you to say, take whatever machine you want, install the Island browser on it. We will create this safe space for you to engage with business applications and business data, but still allow you to do your personal work as well in a safe way. Now, this also means that the auditing, the logging capability that we're performing is and can be very different. When you're in a business application, fully audited, you have no right to privacy. We're going to monitor things like keystrokes, screenshots, full session recording if you want. But that same user has to know that when they bounce out of that business domain into personal email, personal banking, even an Amazon shopping cart, they need to know that we're not monitoring that. In fact, that's fully anonymized. We don't want to know the username. We don't want to know the credentials. We don't want to take screenshots of their bank account. So it's a highly customizable auditing philosophy that says audit what you need to in the business world, but guarantee privacy in the non-business world.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the question, because so many of us are trying to find the better browser. I'll leave it at that, right? I've tested different browsers. I love DuckDuck. It was the DuckDuckGo's search engine, and then there was I can't remember what it was called, but it was a browser. But it's always behind, right? It's a privacy protecting browser, but it's always behind it doesn't work on certain sites. And it's like, even as a consumer, I would love a better browser, right? And that's why I asked, because I'm like, ooh, if you could use the Island browser in a consumer use case, but if you're a business client, you do potentially have that option as long as you're running on the same machine.
Absolutely.
And most of my machines are dual purpose anyways, but yeah, that's interesting to know.
Most of our customers are knowledge workers, but the biggest use case we have, third-party contractors, BPOs, right? The engaged user where they need to use their machine for business use,
right,
but it may be on multiple contracts, right? So I'm a consultant working on one project. I need to be able to access the business uses or use cases for that contract, but tomorrow I might be on a different contract, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to swap out that laptop for another laptop.
Right.
So if I can maintain consistency with one build of hardware that I get to choose,
Yeah.
when I signed on an Island, they said, go buy whatever machine you want. And we're going to send you an email inviting me to the Okta domain. And I did. I installed Island on my own Mac. And the minute I logged in, I had my entire Island workspace. No more shipping laptops, no more refreshing laptops at a corporate expense. So OpEx can come down. But more importantly, if there were a catastrophic failure, like some event that kicked my machine or multiple machines offline, how easily could I get back online quickly? Do I have to wait till they ship me a new laptop? Do they have to do a truck roll where they have to refresh or reimage my machine?
Right.
Do they have to spin up a VDI for me to get access to corporate resources?
Right.
What if I could just take my iPad or go to Best Buy and get a $300 Chromebook?
Right.
Install
Or
Island?
go to the Apple store and grab another MacBook.
That's exactly right. So we give our users the freedom to choose what they want to enable a BYOD workforce and still guarantee both better data protection, credential protection, which was the initial conversation,
Right.
And a better user experience.
Sounds amazing.
I think so.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
Thanks very much.
If you want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/IslandBH. For all your Black Hat 2025 coverage, please visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thank you again, Michael.
Thank you, sir.